It was the kind of southern afternoon that seemed to stretch time, humid, slow-moving, and steeped in silence, save for the distant chirping of cicadas and the occasional hum of a passing car. On a narrow road just outside Montgomery, Alabama, a luxury black sedan sat idle on the side of the highway, its hazard lights blinking like a quiet SOS. The hood shimmered under the heat, and beside the rear tire, flat and sagging into the dust, stood a man in an expensive linen suit, frustrated, out of place, and very much alone. About 100 yards up the road, a boy, barely 13, watched from the porch of a small weathered house with peeling paint and a rusted tin roof. His name was Elijah. His skin was the color of warm mahogany, his eyes deep pools of alert curiosity. He was barefoot, wearing shorts and an oversized white t-shirt smeared with grass stains and motor oil. His mother called him old souled, and anyone who spoke to him for more than a minute could see why. There was a steadiness about Elijah, a kind of quiet wisdom not often found in boys his age. He set down the wrench he'd been fiddling with, his latest attempt at repairing his grandfather's broken lawnmower, and without a word, he started walking toward the car. The man by the sedan didn't notice him at first, too engrossed in a phone call that clearly wasn't going well. From what Elijah overheard, roadside assistance had given an estimated time of 2 hours, and the man didn't seem the type who liked to wait. Elijah stopped a few feet away, not wanting to startle him. "You got a spare?" he asked, his voice soft but confident. The man turned, clearly surprised to see a child standing there. "What? Your tire? I can change it if you got a spare in the trunk." The man blinked, sweat dripping from his temple. His tone was guarded. "You know how to change a tire?" Elijah nodded once. "Yes, sir. Done it a bunch of times. For my mom. For our pastor. Even fixed my cousin's pickup once." There was a pause. A long one. The kind that stretches unspoken questions in the air. Questions rooted in assumptions, prejudice, or simple disbelief. The man hesitated. Something in his face, pride, uncertainty, maybe discomfort, almost made him refuse. But then the heat and his rising frustration pushed him over the edge. "All right," he said, stepping aside. Trunks open. Elijah got to work without wasting time. His movements were quick, precise, and efficient. He handled the jack like an expert, loosened the lug nuts with strength that surprised the man. And within 20 minutes, the flat tire was off and the spare secured in its place. All the while, the man watched, arms crossed, phone forgotten in his pocket. When Elijah finally wiped his hands on his shirt, he looked up. "Should be good now. But that spare's pretty worn. You'll want a new one soon." The man nodded, still processing what he'd just seen. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. "Here, for your help." But Elijah shook his head. "No, thank you. Just glad I could help." "You sure?" the man asked, almost offended. "I didn't do it for money." Something in that moment shifted. The man looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. The boy wasn't begging, wasn't trying to hustle, wasn't asking for anything. There was pride in his eyes, not arrogance, just a quiet, grounded dignity that made the man feel small. "What's your name?" "Elijah. Elijah Porter." "Thank you, Elijah Porter," he said, pocketing the money again. "You live here?" Elijah nodded toward the house. "With my mom and little sister. My granddad used to live here too before he passed." The man hesitated again. "You ever think about doing something with cars? Engineering? Mechanics?" Elijah shrugged. "I think about a lot of things. I like fixing stuff." "What college?" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The man extended his hand. "I'm Charles Dunning." The name didn't mean anything to Elijah at the time. It would later. That evening, Charles Dunning sat in his high-rise hotel room in downtown Montgomery, the city lights blinking outside his window, still thinking about the boy, about the pride in his voice, about how that simple act, changing a tire, had become something far more profound. He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and when a voice answered on the other end, he said, I want you to look into a kid for me. Elijah Porter. Lives just outside Montgomery. See what schools he's attending, what programs he's in. I want to help him, but it needs to be discreet. No handouts. Just opportunity. What Charles didn't know was that Elijah's mother had been struggling for months to pay the electricity bills, that her second job cleaning offices barely kept food on the table, that Elijah had stopped going to his school's after-class science club because they started charging a monthly fee they could no longer afford. But Elijah never complained. Not once. He worked odd jobs, mowed lawns, helped neighbors repair fences. Every dollar he earned, he gave to his mother. He said he'd catch up on everything else later. A week passed. Then two. Elijah forgot about the man in the suit. Life had returned to its usual rhythm of school, work, and responsibility. Until one morning, a woman in a sharply tailored skirt stepped onto the porch with an envelope and a smile. I'm from the Dunning Foundation, she said. Elijah's been offered a full scholarship to the Montgomery Technical Academy. Transportation, meals, books, all covered. We'd also like to set up mentorship with one of our engineers, if he's interested. Elijah's mother stood in the doorway, hand covering her mouth. Elijah just stared, eyes wide, unsure if it was real. Why? He finally asked. Because someone saw your potential, the woman replied. And he believes in giving back. That night, Elijah sat by the window as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. He thought about the day he'd walked down the road to help a stranger. He didn't know then that he was walking toward a new life. But deep down, he knew something else. That kindness, when rooted in dignity and offered without expectation, has a power far greater than any tire or engine. It can open doors, rewrite futures, and shift the very narrative of who gets to rise in this world. And in that quiet Alabama dusk, a young black boy began to dream, not just of machines and motors, but of justice, of leadership, and of the power of a single choice to change everything. The first day at Montgomery Technical Academy felt like a different universe to Elijah. The school grounds were sprawling, clean, and orderly, nothing like the crowded, underfunded building he had attended before. Students moved confidently through bright hallways filled with advanced robotics labs, 3D printers, and glass wall classrooms. Every corner seemed to whisper possibilities Elijah had never been invited to consider. But even in that shining place of learning, his journey was not easy. Some students gave him side glances, whispering questions behind backs. Is he one of the scholarship kids? He doesn't look like he belongs here. Others were more direct, dismissing him as someone who got lucky, not someone who had earned his place. He felt it in subtle ways, in the way a teacher would over-explain something only to him, assuming he wouldn't understand, and how no one picked him as a partner for the first group project, in the quiet but constant weight of being the only black kid in most of his classes. He'd come to fix a tire, but now he was expected to fix the way people saw him. Still, Elijah stayed focused. Every morning, he rose early, reviewed his notes, and showed up prepared. Every night, he studied until the page blurred. He knew his presence in those classrooms wasn't just for him. It was for his mother, who kept her apron on late into the night. It was for his grandfather, who once said, "You'll build something important one day, with your hands or with your mind." It was for the kids back in his old neighborhood who might see him and believe they could rise too. Charles Dunning kept his promise, though he remained a silent figure in the background. He had instructed his foundation to provide everything Elijah needed, without fuss, without publicity. But Charles did more than just sign checks. He read every quarterly report on Elijah's performance. And when he saw the first one, grades that were top of the class, notes from teachers praising his work ethic, he picked up the phone and made another call. "Elijah needs more," he said. "Give him access to our Summer Tech Institute in Atlanta. Let him build, let him lead." At the Institute, Elijah met engineers from around the country. He built a solar-powered irrigation system for rural farming communities. When he presented it to the panel, he spoke with a confidence that stunned the room, not because he was loud, but because he spoke like someone who had something to say and knew exactly why it mattered. One evening, After a long day of coding and calibrating, one of the program directors sat next to Elijah as he ate dinner. The man was black, in his 50s, with graying hair, and the kind of presence that made people straighten their backs. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Someone I met when I was your age. Always working, always watching, like he was trying to figure out how the world worked, so he could rebuild it." Elijah smiled. "That's kind of what I want to do." "I know," the man said. "That's why I'm telling you this. There'll always be rooms where they'll question why you're there, where your skin will speak before your words do. But you're not in those rooms because of a favor. You're in them because you earned it, and because you're going to make space for others." That summer became a turning point. Elijah no longer walked with the weight of proving himself. He began walking with purpose. Back home, word began to spread. Teachers at his old school brought up his name when younger students spoke about giving up. Parents whispered stories about the Porter boy who had gone from fixing tires to building solar systems. And Charles Dunning, still watching from a distance, realized something powerful. His life had been changed by Elijah just as much, if not more. Until that day on the side of the road, Charles had believed in merit, in systems, in the belief that hard work rose to the top. But he hadn't seen the barriers built into the soil beneath the system. Elijah didn't need charity. He needed what every kid deserves: access, opportunity, a fair shot. And that realization stirred something in Charles that success alone never had. 2 years later, Charles finally visited Elijah's school. He walked into a robotics showcase where Elijah's team was demonstrating a drone designed for emergency medical delivery in remote areas. It wasn't just functional, it was brilliant. And when Elijah spotted him in the crowd, his face lit up with a smile that hadn't changed since that humid day on the roadside. "Mr. Dunning," he said, shaking his hand firmly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I wouldn't have missed it," Charles replied. After the presentation, they sat outside under a shade tree. Charles looked at him, this young man who had once stood barefoot in the Alabama dust, and now wore the calm, measured confidence of someone who had stepped into his purpose. "I need to thank you," Charles said. Elijah looked confused. "Me? You reminded me what generosity looks like, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. You didn't take the money. You didn't even hesitate. You just helped." Elijah shrugged, a little embarrassed. "You needed help. That was enough." Charles nodded. "And it changed everything. Not just for you. For me. For every child we're going to help through the foundation now. We're expanding our work to underfunded schools, starting an internship program for students of color in tech. You were the beginning of that." A long silence followed, one filled not with awkwardness, but with meaning. As the sun dipped low, Elijah spoke again. "Sometimes I think about that day, how I almost didn't walk over. I was tired. It was hot. I figured someone else might stop. But you did," Charles said. "And that's the difference." Years passed. Elijah graduated at the top of his class, went on to MIT, and later returned to Alabama, not to escape the world, but to shape it. He started an innovation lab in Montgomery, offering free STEM education to underprivileged youth, kids who look like him, who live like he once did. He called it the Open Road Initiative, a tribute to the idea that roads aren't just for traveling. Sometimes, they're where lives intersect, where stories begin, where people meet not by design, but by destiny. One of the walls in the center displayed a photograph, sun-bleached and slightly blurred. It showed a young boy kneeling beside a black car, changing a flat tire, while a man in a linen suit looked on. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Kindness is a choice. So is justice. Both can change a life." Sometimes, all it takes is stopping to help. And every time Elijah walked past that photo, he remembered who he was and who he had chosen to become. Not just a boy from a forgotten